top boxing news.
Hey, we'll start with this. Well, super featherweight up-and-comer from right here in the US of A, Alicia Baumgardner, posted this via her Twitter account yesterday. I'm sure many of you might have seen it already. She was in contact with Eddie Hearn, and apparently, according to Eddie,
She's got her shot.
Harper versus Baumgardner showdown. That's right. Terry Harper, the reigning WBC super featherweight champion. She's set to make her ring return in November. That return is going to be against Alicia Baumgardner. What do I think about this news? I won't lie to you. I'd rather they didn't fight because I love them both.
Don't do this.
But it's the nature of the beast, the nature of the business. The cream of the crop will always permeate to the top.
That's what these two girls are.
Terry Harper, the reigning WBC champion and one of the more promising up-and-comers in the super featherweight division, Alicia Baumgardner. I feel like it was only a matter of time before these two fought.
I just didn't expect it to happen so soon.
I have to admit that outside of a Hyun Mi Choi unification match, I didn't imagine that Steffi Bull and Terry Harper would decide to fight a live animal, live body, like an Alicia Baumgardner. It's a great fight, but it's almost counterintuitive.
Fighting somebody like that?
There'd be risks associated with a Hyun Mi Choi fight, but the rewards are worth the risks because that's a unification match. Whereas Alicia, she's a challenger, not a champion. It's still a risky fight, very risky.
It's a ballsy move fighting her.
Because it will have been a year's time since Terry Harper saw any action. It will have been a year's time since Terry Harper had a fight. She was last in action in November of last year against the then unbeaten Katharina Sanders, her mandatory challenger at that time.
You know, Terry suffered a refracture.
En route to what was supposed to be the Hyun Mi Choi unification match, and she's had to sit out for a while, roughly a year's time. Taking on someone like Alicia Baumgardner voluntarily, it's very ballsy.
It is.
It's a similar situation to what we just saw this past weekend with Shannon Courtenay and Jamie Mitchell. Terry's saving grace, at least in my opinion, is she's already a much more proven fighter and champion than Shannon was ahead of that Jamie Mitchell fight.
Yeah, Terry's resume is more robust.
Eva Wahlstrom, Natasha Jonas, Katharina Sanders. It's safe to say that Terry's quality of competition makes her a more proven fighter than Shannon Courtenay was. Shannon Courtenay, who most solid fighters that she fought were Rachel Ball, who beat her, and Ebony Bridges.
They're good fighters, but they're not as proven as the girls Terry's fought.
As a champion, Terry is more proven ahead of this Alicia Baumgardner fight. She's more proven ahead of this fight than Shannon was ahead of the Jamie Mitchell fight. When it comes to Alicia Baumgardner, this is an opportunity for Alicia, win, lose, or draw, to endear herself with the fans that may not already be familiar with her.
Whether she wins or she loses.
So long as she goes up there, gives it everything she's got, puts on a show, win, lose, or draw, she'll get more fights moving forward. This will be the biggest stage that Alicia Baumgardner has fought on. Think Jessica McCaskill versus Katie Taylor. Jessica lost the fight, she did, but she gave Katie a run for her money. And based on that fight, she was able to get other fights, other opportunities, because
she put on a show.
And Alicia Baumgardner can endear herself to the fans by doing the same. Those who are not familiar with her, they're going to like what they see. Guarantee it.
They're both educated boxer punchers.
I reiterate, it's very ballsy of Steffi Bull and Terry Harper to take someone on like this after a year of inactivity and a surgery to the refracture. I mean, they could have chose somebody else, a lighter touch.
Some journey woman.
But it looks like they've landed on Alicia Baumgardner, who was in action earlier this year against Vanessa Bradford, fought to a decision. Alicia, whose lone career defeat came at the hands of Christina Lenarda 2 years ago in what was a very competitive fight.
Both Terry and Alicia can punch.
Terry has the more robust body of work of the two fighters in the fight, whereas Alicia, she's got activity on her side. Alicia actually got to have a fight earlier this year, whereas Terry hasn't seen any action since November of last year. Even contest, if you ask me.
It's a great fight.
Though I didn't expect this, not so soon. I half expected Terry to take on her old buddy, Kalia Karuni, since, her, Kalia, Steffi, they traded barbs by way of social media. There's some bad blood there, and I half expected Terry to take on Kalia in her big comeback fight, not somebody like this. Supposed to be going down next month, November the 13th, on the undercard of Kid Galahad's next fight. Kid Galahad, who I believe may be facing Kiko Martinez.
Raven Chapman's going to be on the undercard.
Attempting to advance to a professional record of 2-0. She's already made a pro debut, and, I'm looking forward to it. We'll get into a full fight breakdown as the fight date approaches. In other news, Vito Milnitsky Jr. to headline Fox show Christmas night at the Prudential Center in Newark. And this story, a portion of it, caught my attention, not because of Vito's next fight, which is happening on Christmas night. No. The interesting portion of this story...
The interesting part
is a portion of the article that reads, Christmas falls on a Saturday this year, and the PBC must produce a certain number of shows per calendar year to fulfill its contractual obligation with Fox, which has exercised the fourth year option to which it was entitled as part of a 3-year deal it entered into with the PBC in September of 2018. You heard that right. Fox is giving the PBC at least one more year. They're extending their relationship. Don't confuse this with a renewal. This is still the same agreement they entered into in 2018.
We've touched on this before.
The last couple of months, there were a lot of insider rumors that perhaps Fox might terminate the deal early because the numbers the PBC was putting up for them, they were dismal, abysmal, nothing to write home about, that they might so decide to terminate the deal on just third year of it when they have the option of extending the deal for a fourth year.
It seems they've done that.
Where industry insiders felt that the PBC and Fox's relationship may be approaching the end, it appears that they've still got one more year to get it right. They've still got one more year together. It's Fox's decision, after all, to do this because it was their option to exercise, and
they've exercised it.
They've done that. So what can we expect from Fox and the PBC moving forward into the year of 2022? Certainly something bigger, something better than Vito Milnitsky and whoever it is he's fighting. We know that Deontay Wilder, he's not retiring. They plan on trying to get him back out there in either April or May, and they're a fight like a Wilder versus Ruiz or a Wilder versus Robert Helenius.
Those are realistic options.
They'd likely try to do the fight as a pay-per-view, a Fox PBC pay-per-view.
Yeah, they're not just going to give that away.
I want to say that this past weekend's fight looks to have been more of a success, a financial one, than their previous fight, their previous outing in February of last year. There's a glaring difference here, there is. The operational costs for this fight are substantially less than what they were for the fight back in February. The difference being that, they had something like $60 million in guaranteed purses to the fighters. 30 for Wilder, 30 for Fury, whereas this time, the guaranteed purses only come out to about $16 million. That's 3 times less money than you guaranteed these guys last year. Last year, you guaranteed to both of them a sum total of $60 million. You spent about $5.4 million running Super Bowl ads to promote the fight. So the break-even point for last year's fight was a lot harder to hit because the fight was more expensive to make. This time, the fight was less expensive.
It was only $16 million in guaranteed purses.
And you ain't got to sell as many pay-per-views to cover $16 million in guaranteed purses as you do $60 million in guaranteed purses.
It's not a secret that last year's fight lost money.
That bit of information was confirmed by none other than Top Rank's Bruce Trempler. Piracy cut into the buy rate of the fight and its overall profits. What kind of money it was able to generate. I think they had better luck this time because this time they learned their lesson.
You can't give these guys $60 million in guaranteed purses.
You don't know with any certainty that these two guys are good for it, that these two guys are going to be able to bring it back. And you don't know how much piracy might also affect the buy rate of the pay-per-view. So what you do is you give them a nominal guarantee and make the rest from the upside of the pay-per-view, which will be easier to hit since the operational costs for this fight are lower than they were for last year's fight. I don't yet know what the pay-per-view buys were for this past weekend's fight, though I'm getting the impression that they were actually able to make some money this time, that they're actually in the plus, not the minus.
A lot of people like the fight.
And even though Deontay Wilder lost, he endeared himself to a lot of people with the effort that he put forth. He said that he wanted to go out on a shield, and he did. There are a lot of people that are appreciative of that. They enjoyed his performance, and if he comes back in April or May of next year, perhaps the people at PBC and Fox put him on a pay-per-view with an Andy Ruiz or a Robert Helenius, somebody like that. Deontay Wilder could very well be a big part of the PBC and Fox's bottom line in the year of 2022. Errol Spence Jr. as well.
Maybe they shoot for an Ugas unification match.
There's some things to be addressed there. Yordenis Ugas, the reigning WBA welterweight champion, he's under orders to face Emanis Stanionis, who very recently signed to Pro Bellum. I don't know where we are with that. I don't know where we are with that fight.
I don't know.
Ugas can circumvent Stanionis if he's set to unify with another champion, like Errol Spence Jr. I don't know if those conversations are happening yet, though I wouldn't rule out that they are.
You can do that fight as a Fox pay-per-view.
A unification match between two of the PBC's boys, the PBC's champions, Ugas and Spence. We don't have an ETA on when exactly Spence is set to return, though it's conceivable that he will return next year, well into it, maybe the spring or summer months.
This is yet another fight that Fox might put on pay-per-view next year.
I'll go as far as saying that Spence's next fight, whoever it's against, whether it's against Ugas or not, I'll go as far as saying that his very next fight in all likelihood will be a pay-per-view. So you have Deontay Wilder's ring return, Errol Spence Jr.'s ring return. Both can be billed as pay-per-views. You have guys that have been missing in action like Keith Thurman, world champion Gary Russell Jr., WBC champion in the featherweight division. These are also guys whose next appearances might happen on Fox next year since they don't seem to have very much going on this year. The PBC is going to have a stronger 2022 than 2021 was if they hope to stay in bed with Fox, because I reiterate, this is the initial deal. This is all part of the same deal they already signed in 2018. And while Fox has so chosen to extend the deal one more year, that was always their option to exercise. If the PBC wants them to walk into a brand new agreement beyond this one,
Because this one ends next year.
they are going to need a stronger 2022 than 2021 and 2020 was.
We'll see what happens.
Finally, in heavyweight news per tweet from Michael Benson, Tyson Fury on his boxing future. I've got one fight left on my contract with Top Rank and ESPN, and we'll see what that is. But I'm not thinking about boxing right now. I don't know if I need to fight anymore. I don't know what the future holds. Twitter account that goes by the name of Josh2440_ said, if you want to be known as one of the greatest heavyweights ever, you can't just beat Vlad and Wilder. I have to agree. There are a lot of very emotional fight fans out there, sentimental ones, on the heels of this weekend's heavyweight contest, likening Tyson Fury to the legends of old. But Tyson Fury, as exciting as he has been for this era of boxing, he ain't got the resume of a Larry Holmes, a Muhammad Ali, Lennox Lewis, a Joe Louis. I mean, it really isn't that complete a body of work. He beat Vladimir, went on a 2-year hiatus, comes back, and he fights Deontay Wilder 3 times in the subsequent next 3 years.
You guys need to calm down.
Vince Cummings of the Boxing Rant stated, you're not the best heavyweight of your era because you beat one of the other top guys twice. Fury still has work to do to make that claim. And I gotta agree with Vince here. It was an entertaining fight, no doubt about it. It was a much-needed shot in the arm for the division and the sport of boxing, and that's all well and good. But beating Deontay Wilder again does not legitimize Tyson Fury as the best heavyweight of this era because neither he or Deontay have faced most of the heavyweights in this era. And that's the bar of standard. That's what it
At
takes.
least that's what it used to take.
If Tyson Fury were to retire right now, people would be divided on his claim to being this era's best heavyweight when all he did was beat Vlad at the tail end of Vlad's career, and he fought Wilder 3 times, but Wilder, he hadn't fought the vast majority of other heavyweights that were out there, the Anthony Joshuas, the Pulevs, the Povetkins, the Dillian Vites, and he was around for most of them, lest we forget. Wilder's no newbie. He's been around since 2008.
He was around for a good number of these fighters when they were in their prime.
And so was Tyson Fury. But Tyson Fury's complete body of work so far really just consists of the Vladimir Klitschko fight and the Wilder trilogy.
a grand total of 1 title defense.
Just one, so he's supposed to be up there with Joe Louis because he beat the same guy 3 times? Do you know how many title defenses Joe Louis had? How many Larry Holmes had?
Muhammad Ali as well.
Let's not conflate things just because you guys were really excited with Saturday night's fight. It was a great fight, thoroughly entertaining, no doubt about it. It was better than I thought it would be. Fury's claim to being this era's best heavyweight would be a tenuous claim. I won't lie to you. There's an argument there. There definitely is. But if he were to retire right now, having not fought Dillian Vite, having not fought Anthony Joshua or Alexander Usyk,
Would be a tenuous claim.
the saving grace here is that this is what Tyson Fury is saying now. And Tyson Fury is notorious for going back on his own word. I mean, he just fought on Saturday, so of course the subject of wrapping up his career is somewhere in there in his mind.
Just made a fuck ton of money.
And at the expense of both Top Rank and the PBC, left them in the red. He made a fuck ton of money last year, too. Perhaps not as much as he would have made with Anthony Joshua, and how much he could still make if Anthony Joshua makes it through the Usyk rematch. Perhaps not as much, but enough that he can retire, enough that he doesn't need to fight anymore.
The same applies to Wilder.
The fight fans, the paying public, the customers, they have their desires, their demands, and the fighters do as well. And sometimes there's no middle ground. It's not the same thing. I don't know that Tyson Fury wants to battle on after this Saturday's fight, though I wouldn't get married to anything he's saying right now because that could change. Listen, ahead of the fight, he was saying he's got a hit list beyond the Wilder fight. He said he wanted to fight Dillian Whyte afterwards. Now that we're here in the here and after, the tune is different. Thus, I wouldn't get married to anything Tyson Fury says at any given moment. Give the man a couple of days, let him rest, see how he feels in a few weeks' time, few months.
Because if he is going to fight again, it won't be for a few months.
The bickering and banter of boxing fans are hardly any concern to Tyson Fury right now. What the spectators in the spectator sport might want of him having been out there just a few days ago in a grueling, physically taxing fight, a fight where he had to pick himself up off the canvas at least 2 times. I don't think Tyson Fury's worried about what me and you think right now. I just know that if he were to call it a career off of this, his 3rd fight with Deontay Wilder and his 2nd recorded victory over him, feel like there's a lot of unfinished business. And his claim to being this era's best heavyweight, it would be a tenuous one. This era should not be confused with the previous one, the Klitschko era. Tyson Fury was there to end Vladimir's reign, but hindsight being 2020, he caught him at the tail end of Vladimir's career. This era, the one we're in now, it's a different era to that one. And in this era, there are other top guys, other big fights to fight in. Dillian Whyte is one of them. The winner of Joshua versus Usyk, that's another.
And neither Fury or Wilder have fought them.
You can think whatever you like. Have your anecdotes and make of them what you will. I just know that a lot of people out there, if Fury were to retire, they'd look at all of that as unfinished business.
They say he's not the greatest.